our startup founders are the freedom fighters. They are the ones who will free this country of all the miseries that we are going through.
India's success story is not the same as China, and we will have to take a separate path from China. Is it so?
The biggest challenge in this country is Saraswati and Lakshmi together. People don't want to see that. Bollywood mindset we should come out. In a Bollywood movie, you would see a teacher, a professor with that jula and then a four kind of a guy, right? That need not be the case. There are billionaires in the US education system, valuations running into tens of billions of dollars. In India, that needs to become a reality.
How can a young researcher make his career in India in today's time? Hello and welcome to this exciting new episode of Science Unblocked, a podcast by Blockchain for Impact. I am your host, Dr. Gaurav Singh. In my career, I have met many academicians, researchers, entrepreneurs, and innovators. Some of them are overtly pessimistic about India. Some of them are very optimistic about India. But there is a third voice, a voice that speaks the truth based on data and facts. And these facts and data are obtained by years of experience as an academician, as an innovator, and as an administrator. So with me today is Professor V. Ramgopal Rao, sir. Welcome, sir, to this podcast.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Let me just introduce Dr. Ram a bit. Sir has more than 500 research papers to his name, 50 patents. He also runs two deep tech startups called SoilSense and NanoSniff. And sir is currently the Group Vice Chancellor of BITS Pilani. Previously, sir has headed positions like IIT Delhi Director, and sir has been associated with IIT Bombay as a faculty for a very long time. I once again welcome you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So, sir, I know something about your journey. You started from a small town called Kolhapur in Andhra Pradesh. Then you went on to do your engineering from Kakatiya University. And then you did your MTech from IIT Bombay. And after that, you did your PhD from Germany. Sir, your career is actually the dream of any middle-class family. So you must be hearing this also from your relatives many times that you are a role model for many of people who dream for their kids to reach the higher standards. Any comments on that, sir?
No, in fact, fortunately for me, everything worked out very well. There are so many bright people in the rural areas. I come from a very remote place called Kolhapur, which is now in the Telangana region, in the Nagar Karnool district, the Mahabu Nagar it used to be. So in Kolhapur, it's a small little town, the border, almost the corner kind of a place. So so there I studied till 12th in Telugu medium. My first 15 years till 10th and then up to 17 years for intermediate as we used to call it, all in Telugu medium. So I had no exposure to anything coming from a rural background. And but I think education was the only pathway to a career for me. So there was nothing else because our family, there was no other thing we knew. So get a good education and find a good job. That was all that mattered. So I, like everybody else, I also pursued engineering at that time. And then, but my life changed after I went to IIT Bombay for my master's. And there I could come across some of the finest professors and I could see where I stand, in relation to the rest of the country because the class had people from all over the country, from elite kind of backgrounds. And so there, that is where I got the confidence that I am no inferior. I can do as well as any of them. And I was able to do very well in my master's. And my professors there wanted me to continue for a PhD. And but then I had some family kind of issues too because ours was kind of a lower middle class background. I needed to take up a job, so I did all kinds of things. And then I started my PhD journey at IIT Bombay. But then I migrated to Germany, where I finished my PhD. And then I went to US for my postdoctoral fellowship from UCLA. There I spent 2 years. And I think that exposure to international universities, the European culture of doing science and the American culture of doing technology, and so it was very educative for me. And then IIT Bombay offered me a job when I was in UCLA. I came back and joined IIT Bombay way back in 1998, and I spent 18 years at IIT Bombay until 2016. And so that's a year when I was appointed as the director of IIT Delhi, where I spent 6 years as the director, then one more year as a faculty member. Then I moved to BITS Pilani. So I think I consider that I'm pretty lucky that way. So there are so many bright people, but I got the right opportunities, and more importantly, I also made use of every opportunity that came my way, whether it was small or big did not matter. For me, once I take up any job or any kind of a work, I would give my 100% to that even now. And I think making use of all the opportunities that came my way was indeed a very, good thing that I did. There are so many people who get opportunities, but then, they're always looking for something bigger. They don't really realize what they have at hand. And so I was not like that. So whatever that came my way, I did very well in that.
So, sir, in a country where there is a lot of emphasis on education and job safety, basically, so how can we inculcate this entrepreneurial mindset in those people?
It's always a challenge because in India particularly, the coming from we are only 75 years, right, as a independent country. We came from absolute poverty. If you look at the statistics of India when we got freedom and where we are now, we have come some distance. We may not have gone too far, but we have come some distance now in terms of per capita income. We may not have done well, but in terms of opportunities, there are enough opportunities now. So I think the first job for many people, like from our backgrounds, family backgrounds, is to secure the career, right? So doing entrepreneurship, taking those risks will come later once you secure your basic needs.
My concern, sir, is because of this mindset of jobs, basically, and excelling in academics based on the performance that you do in your college, schools, and then you climb onto above ladder for institutions, and then finally goes to become a professor or a leader of an administration. So the thing is, India is ranked third in terms of research paper publications, but what I see that most of the publications are being done to actually secure a good job or get a promotion. So that innovation mindset is sometimes taken aback just because we are mostly focused on mass production of papers.
No, that is the problem. In fact, if you ask me, that is the issue right now. Again, it comes back to securing one's career, right? I mean, what if you are doing a PhD, right? What is that is important for you to get a job? Publications. Therefore, you are focusing on the publications. If you are a faculty member, right, an assistant professor, what is important for you to get promoted to associate professor position? More papers. Therefore, you write more papers. I think these are all driven by the metric system, right? What
Right.
we have in place today. And so therefore people are following that. I don't blame anyone. But as a nation, I think, this phase might continue for some more time, but the change needs to happen. I think the change needs to be from a product to a profitability kind of a continuum, right? If you are presented with a problem, right, you see a problem, the problem is given by somebody or you found it in the society, you saw all the farmers, not making enough money, the farmers' suicides, right? When you get moved by that kind of a problem, then those problems become projects, right? You write a project proposal, you now want to work on that, you make a structured way, you would like to solve the problem, you approach an agency, could be BFI or could be a government agency, could be an industry, right? Then that project, basically out of that you do research now. So those projects get funded, and the outcome of those projects are publications, right? Because you have found something new, and all our metric systems, essentially tell you that depending on how many people know what you have done, right, and your recognitions will depend, right? If my paper is read by 1,000 people, right? That is something which I can be so proud of, and I get awards and rewards and everything based on that. So the entire ecosystem is you write papers so that everybody gets to know what you are doing. And then, so that is where it used to be for a very long time, for almost like 50 years in India. So problem to publications, right? It used to stop there and all of that. But now last 7 years, 10 years, I see that patents are becoming important. Everybody now has got enough awareness about filing IP, because they believe that if I have found a solution to the problem, right, I should also protect it on my name before I publish. So therefore, people are now filing patents, right, before they publish papers. India now ranks sixth in the world when it comes to patents.
It comes
We
to
are
patent.
growing in double digits now for almost like 5 6 years now. So I think that's a good sign. So now from pure publications, now we have also become more IP protection kind of a nation. So we are doing well on that. But what next? Now today, if you ask me, in 98 or 99% of cases, it stops with a patent and a publication, right? After, because that is enough for you. Because why has it happened? Because in many institutions now, IITs or BITS or any institution you take, patents are also seen as equivalent to papers. Now, if I have enough patents, people would be happy that I have filed patents. In many places now, people are asking, why have you not filed a patent? Right?
Right.
So therefore, since filing of patents is also being seen as a metric, for promotions and recognitions. So therefore, if you don't file any patents, only have papers, today it's difficult to even make a career. It has become such a big necessity. So people are filing patents that way. But what should come next? In the next 5 years or 10 years, if you keep on filing patents, if nothing happens to those patents, nothing would have changed on the ground. So now those patents need to become prototypes. Right now, out of that IP that you created, out of the knowledge that you gained by working on the project, therefore you need to now build a prototype, right? Something that works, something which people can test, right? Something which you can take it to some place and get it tested, right? So prototypes are now becoming more and more important. Now, many funding agencies are also pushing people to develop prototypes of what they have done. That is, the moment you develop a prototype, then the technology readiness levels, all of that come into picture, right? So many of these prototypes today are at the TRL 3 kind of a level, where a proof of concept is shown, right? But that's it, right? And then if you show that prototype, then people are happy, and then you have gone beyond publications and patents, so people are happy. But I think those prototypes now need to become products, right? And
Right.
that is the valley of death. A prototype becoming a product is where, for example, organizations like BFI can play a major role. And again, a large percentage of Indian academia, right, can come up to prototypes now, but they don't know how to go beyond that. And they're hand holding them, creating those ecosystems where those prototypes can be developed further to higher TRL, right? TRL 7, 8. Once you create it up, go up to TRL 7, 8, then a startup might get interested, or you can yourself start a company, or industry will get interested, so you can transfer the technology. And those products then, go on to go to the market, earn profits, right? So therefore, a problem becoming profit, right, that is the continuum. So you start with a problem, right? You write a project. Out of those projects come patents and the publications. Out of those patents and publications come prototypes. Those prototypes, with the help of startups or industry, then become products, and those products generate profits, and those profits go back to solving more problems, right? That's how that entire ecosystem needs to function. Anywhere, if that is broken, right, or in large number of cases, if that is broken, then it's not a sustainable ecosystem. If keep on investing money, people are continuing to write papers and continuing to file patents, wouldn't have solved any problem for anyone. Somebody may be using that knowledge, somebody may be using that IP, developing things, which is good for the world that way, but India would not have benefited in any way. So we will continue to buy these technologies because we haven't developed them, right? Somebody developed out of our knowledge. I think that will not help as a nation. Patent, publish, prosper, right? These are the three things that need to happen. Out of patents should generate prosperity, right? If that doesn't happen, then it's like another publication. So nothing is wrong. I mean, just only publishing papers is not wrong, only filing patents is not wrong. But if everybody is only doing that, right, then it's wrong. At least some section of Indian academic community need to go beyond publications and patents, need to demonstrate how to take those technologies to the next level, right, and earn money out of that, right, and so that Saraswati to Lakshmi, right, that transition we need to make. Today, if you look at the Indian education system, Lakshmi to Saraswati is enabled. There are people, you can get admission if you have money, right? Even, many top universities worldwide also can give you admission if you have money, right? But that Saraswati to Lakshmi is more difficult. That we have not enabled, in our ecosystem. So I may have generated a lot of knowledge, but I can still be poor, right? That's
That is
because
true.
we haven't completed the entire, ecosystem for the problem to profit, kind of a continuum. And that I think, needs to be the next phase of growth for the country.
That was very enlightening, sir. Now, you just mentioned about deep tech. You are yourself running to deep tech startups. So, we also mentioned Valley of Death. In your opinion, deep tech culture in India, how it is going forward? What is the future? Because as we know, we are a resource poor country, and deep tech requires a lot of time and money to actually come up with something that can be
As
used.
I said, we are still lower middle class kind of a country, right? Securing jobs is very important. Now I have a PhD, I can find a good job, right? Now for me to not do that and then do a company doesn't come naturally. And then if you are a faculty member, you have a secure job. And again, for you to get out of that and start a company is not considered a very natural process. And therefore, very few people venture into that. And then the long gestation times and even the funding becomes a problem because it needs that patient capital, right? I mean, somebody continuously funding you until you become profitable and without even without anything in sight, you may fail at the end of the day, right? So therefore, I think with so many uncertainties, expecting people in a later stage in their career, to do a deep tech and to make it profitable, therefore the probability becomes that much lower as compared to an e-commerce or a fintech or a business model innovation or an aggregation kind of a model. So therefore, you have very few deep tech startups to start with and very few who succeed beyond that, right? I think these are all the challenges, that exist. Therefore, I think creating those support systems for these late stage kind of startups, for these deep tech startups is very, very important.
Next question that I will like to ask you, sir, is research a career option that has sufficient jobs in it? We all know that after 12th class, if you are choosing engineering or medical, at least you have job security. Now, not just the number of jobs, but the salaries that you get in research roles are very. I don't want to even use the term that it is very less because it is like 10 times less than what a doctor gets or an engineer gets. So, what can be done in this regard? Are we doing enough in this regard?
I think India's problem today, if you ask me, is job creation. We need 1 million jobs per month. That's a number of jobs
Per
we
month, sir.
need to create right now. At the rate we are graduating students, right? That's a huge number of jobs that we require today, and to benefit from our demographic kind of a dividend. That is a challenge that we have right now, and but the science investments leading to job creation, right? That has to happen, and that will again happen if you bridge the gap between research and innovation. Like I said, when knowledge generates wealth, right, that wealth will create jobs. Now if you have, out of your technology, right, out of your knowledge, you have created a new product line, right? I have figured out now, let's say, how to diagnose some particular disease in the market for which currently there is no cost effective technology available. Now you start manufacturing it, now you start selling it, now people start buying that, and that process will create more jobs. So therefore, unless you bridge the research and innovation gap, right, you will never create jobs out of research.
Do you also think that too much reliance on IIT ecosystem is also hindering research in some way? Because whenever I hear any government scheme, IIT is mostly the beneficiary.
I have spent 25 years in IIT, so I IITs are good. There are good people, good students, good ecosystem. All of that is there. But again, it's the breakdown of the higher education system, that this tier one and tier two, there is a huge gap, right? And so therefore, that is where, in fact, I have written 1.5 years ago about how the tier one institutions in the country should work with tier two institutions to bring up the research culture, right? And in fact, I wrote it in my op-eds in Times of India. Now, a few months ago, Government of India started a program called PAIR, where they identified tier 1 institutions, they identified tier 2 institutions. Now there is funding available for tier 1 institutions to collaborate with the tier 2 institutions. That is something which I have been talking about for a long time, because those partnerships are important to bring up the tier 2 to the level of tier 1, because otherwise, with a handful of institutions, you cannot absorb all the funding, and you cannot deliver on the promises that are expected out of scientists. So that's now happening. So I think those partnerships are important, and similarly partnerships between academia and industry, where even industry can receive government funding, right? If they are working in a risky area where the chances of failure are very high, otherwise they will never take risk. They will only pursue the traditional pathways for wealth creation, because if I invest in something, you have no guarantee that it will get you any revenues, and so you can take that risk. But government has done that RDI fund now, right? And that 1 lakh crore fund is a good step in that direction. For the first time in the history of this country, they are saying now this money can go to a private industry. Of course, it is still a loan, it is still a low interest loan and all of that, but I think it is the step in the right direction. And that is what that needs to happen more and more. I think we should fund ideas. We should fund good projects and good teams. It should not matter whether you are from government or private or NGO. Nothing should matter really. Ideas should get funded. And the risk always needs to be taken by the government agencies, because private people will never be able to take that risk, and government should be willing to take that risk.
Sir, as a nation, do you think that we are mostly late to the party? Let it be AI, let it be blockchain, let it be quantum. So we are mostly doing the job of catching up. Now, even the AI thing, most of the base models are not, in fact, no base model is in India currently. So is it so, and how can we change it?
I think that has to do with the research culture in the country. We are most of the time we are a follower kind of we have that follower kind of a mindset, right? Somebody has to start it somewhere, and then if they have written 10 papers, we will write 100 papers, right, in that area. But we are not the first 10 papers in that sector, right? We are always the rest 90 papers.
We will provide a cheaper option of the things.
That's how it has always been in India. And but that's also to do with because most of the funding comes from the government sources, and again the inability to fail with government funding is also a big problem, because if I propose something which is very path breaking and government has funded me some huge amount of money and I fail, right, I would be buried forever because of that, and I would never even become eligible to take up any further grants. Because when I go for the next grant, my record shows that I took up a problem I could not deliver, right? So you cannot fail with government money, which is the major reason why people don't want to take a risk. You take a safe bet where I can publish some papers, and the moment you are able to publish some papers, you are fine. And if you filed some patents, it's a bonus. And if you developed a patent, you are extraordinary, right? So that's how the entire ecosystem has been. So therefore, in that situation, you can't expect somebody to, take a problem which is for the first time nobody has ever done, right? And then get government funding and then, execute that. I think that risk today is almost zero in the system. DST tried to change it. They started a program called High Risk, High Reward Scheme.
Right.
The program itself is called High Risk, High Reward Scheme. They said under that scheme, we will not fund any project which has been tried before, right? And then, but then when they looked at the approval rates of those schemes, hardly any proposals got funded, right? Again, the problem is no proposal got funded because the committee was not willing to take a risk. So they again were only looking at, if they can, this is too new a problem, nobody has done that, so therefore, we cannot afford, we cannot give you that project.
Without review of literature, no funding is there.
So the acceptance rate was so low, right? And that's again because the committee will not take that risk. And though the scheme is meant for high reward and high risk, high reward kind of a thing, so it's a kind of, unfortunately, it's a vicious circle that we have gotten into. But the blame lies, squarely on our inability to fail with government funding.
When I think about it, there is a stark contrast with our neighbor China. We got independence at almost the same time, and 25 years back, we used to say that China, we can compete, and all. Now, no one even says that we can compete. What happened with China, which didn't happen with us at all?
That sustained high level of investments into science and technology for 2 decades is the reason behind all of that. Today, if you look at, right, you can check this data on the web, what China funds for their 2 universities, the 2 top universities, Tsinghua University, Peking University, is our entire Ministry of Education budget. Right, our entire ministry budget is what China funds for 2 universities in the US, in China. That's the difference in scale we are talking about. And China is already investing, 5 times larger economy than us, and they are investing over 2% on the science and technology. And they have also relaxed the rules pretty significantly, and that's how they are able to, get the talent back, from all over the world, and even attract talent from the US and top schools everywhere by paying competitive salaries. And then they learn those tricks now. They, with all the best people, that they have been able to get back into China, right? Obviously, they have done very well. I think those sustained investments into science and technology for 2 decades is what has caused that problem. What has caused that, advantage for China. I think, that the ability to take those bold decisions is completely gone now. 50 years ago, in the same country, Professor C.N.R. Rao became director of an institute, right? At very early age, in his 30s, he became director. At the age of 28, he became a full professor at IIT Kanpur. Today, even if you have Ramanujam, you cannot make that person full professor at the age of 28. You need a PhD, you need postdoc, you join, you spend 5 years, then you become associate, you spend another 5 years, then you become professor. Until you are 40, there is no way you can ever, even if you have won the Fields Medal in mathematics, you cannot become professor before the age of 38 or 40, because you have to finish those mandatory years in every service. And C.N.R. Rao became full professor at the age of 28. Right? We had those flexibilities, and that is the era when we produced Bose, Saha, C.N.R. Rao's, all of them we were able to produce because the administrators, academic administrators, were trusted. If they took a decision, nobody questioned it, because they took that in the interest of the institute and by looking at the caliber of these people. Today, it doesn't matter, whether you bring in any top administrator into any public funded institution, you are governed by all these rules. And there is a major trust deficit within the system, because the trust, that's again, it comes down to the autonomy of an institute, right? In an IIT kind of a system, I should be answerable to the board. Right? Board is entirely made by the government, right? The chairman is decided by the government. All the board members are decided by the government. So all matters of any administrative issue within the IIT should rest with the board. If a board decides, end of the thing. No, nothing should go beyond that. Never happens like that. Every time there is a problem, it goes beyond board, right? And it goes to ministries, it goes to all these auditors and all of them. And finally, it becomes so difficult for anyone to take any decision. So that lack of autonomy, lack of trust, in the system, nobody wants to take any risk now. So everybody is just, following the rules. And when you have so many rules, right, and if everybody is just following those rules blindly because you have no other choice, you can't expect, any major kind of changes to happen.
So one question that also now when I discuss in public forums, I keep get this answer that India's success story is not the same as China, and we will have to take a separate path from China. Is it so? Or are we just trying to actually save faces here?
The US path is, very heavy investment. When US does something, look at AI, right? That level of investments, nobody will be able to, do anymore, right? That's not even possible. The China is trying to compete with US with much lesser investments. Their deep seek kind of a model, or even the way now they have been able to innovate in semiconductor chips, right? To make those 2 nanometer, 4 nanometer kind of nodes, you need extreme UV lithography, UUV lithography, and US has banned it. US said China cannot get it, right? So how would China ever make those, 2 nanometer kind of chips now? That was not possible. They recently filed a patent for achieving the same length, right? Achieving the same critical dimensions on the chip without using extreme UV, right? So now they are going ahead with that entire process. So China has always been innovating to, because of the restrictions on the technology, right? Now they have no chance but to innovate, right, and to achieve the same goal with much less investments. DeepSeek is one great example of that, and semiconductors, I can guarantee you, China will start to beat the US pretty soon, and I think that is the necessity for China. India is neither here nor there, right? We are not even able to innovate because there are, India, if you ask me, islands of excellence everywhere, right? You have, these islands of excellence in all good institutions in the country, but a sea of underinvestment. Everywhere you see, there is an underinvestment. And today, thanks to the quantum missions, the cyber physical missions, and all of these missions, people are at least getting funded now. I think now I see critical funding crossing that critical funding level, and people are receiving money. But it will take some more time for us, to reach that kind of a stage, because it's a very late kind of a start. I mean, we started funding now beyond that subcritical levels only for the past, I would say, 3 4 years, right? And now there are projects in our institutions which are like 200 crores, 300 crores for doing an activity. That kind of a money was unthinkable earlier. Earlier, the largest grant in this country ever received was when IIT Bombay, I was a project investigator in that, IASC came together and we wrote a proposal for 100 crores, and that was funded sometime in 2006 2007. Until that time, right, there was no project of that magnitude in an academic institute. That was the first large project between two institutions with a total funding of 100 crore, IIT Bombay, IASC, the two top institutions in the country. But now I see that individual groups within the institutes are receiving hundreds of crores of funding, right? But these are still very select groups, very select institutions, but at least we have broken that barrier, right? And which is a good sign. But I think for all, but this China is doing for the past 20 years. So therefore, I think they have the 20-year lead, if you ask me, when it comes to the innovations and the ability to innovate and compete with the US. But India now, this level of investments, if we continue to make for the next 2 decades, I think we will see some progress in that. But again, as a percentage of GDP, we are not investing enough. A few groups receiving that high level of funding, but a large number of groups still receiving subcritical funding is not going to help us. So therefore, we also need to increase as a percentage GDP level, right? I would think our investments need to go up by at least 5 times, right? I
So
mean,
we are
right
spending
now
zero
we are
point
at
0.6
zero
and
point 0.6 to zero point 0.7, but out of that, half of that 0.7 percentage of GDP goes for defense and ISRO also. They're all part of that. So I think academia gets about 0.3, 0.2% of GDP. Industry is hardly spending anything right now. So I think that money, I would think our academia, it has to be 10 times more. And only then you will start seeing some excellence emerging out of these institutions. But all of that needs to be monitored also properly. Our biggest problem is that with government funding, it's a one-time funding. You receive the money, after that there is no review. And when you need more money in the project, then they will conduct a review. But then all government reviews are minimum satisfactory, so you get that money. So as a result, government also is losing trust, that you keep on receiving money, keep on giving you money, but then nothing seems to come out. right? I think if you are in that position, you are also worried. Where is all this funding going into? But I think that's the problem. I think along with increased funding, right, we need to focus on ease of doing research, remove all the bureaucratic hurdles, right, and then monitor these projects. I've always said that it should be milestone funding. As I was also telling you in BFI, never promise full money, right? If you have promised $3 million to a particular group, it's not that you are guaranteed the $3 million over 5 years, right? You say that for milestone, this is $500,000. You now demonstrate that milestone, then you get the next tranche to get the, to receive the money, you have to fulfill this milestone, then you get the remaining 1 million. So it should always be milestone based funding. And the moment you do that milestone based funding, I can assure you, lot of things will fall in place. There is lot of good talent in academia. It's still the case. But I think they need to be brought together and they need to be given a good problem statement. I often say that the same country, right, during the COVID time, Indian academia has done very well, right? In IIT Delhi, I was director of IIT Delhi at that time. IIT Delhi during the COVID time filed the highest number of patents as compared to the previous 60 years. Our highest number of patents were during the COVID time. Why? Because the entire institute, whoever stayed back during the COVID time, their only goal was to solve the COVID problem. There was a very well defined problem. And we also funded them very generously during the COVID with internal funding. We gave them grants internally to solve whatever COVID problem they wanted to solve. Our highest revenue, from IP licensing was during the COVID time because people innovated. There was a low-cost RT-PCR kit developed in a matter of 1 year from IIT Delhi. Before that, the RT-PCR was done at 4,000 rupees. We launched it at 600 rupees when the country was doing it at 4,000 rupees. Suddenly, all the prices crashed. There was a 50 rupee antigen kit for COVID, right? Which again became very popular. And so I think, but all those innovations happened in the 2 year time frame when COVID was at its peak. So therefore, I think given a well-defined problem, academia can deliver, right? But COVID was an opportunity because there was nothing else to do other than solving COVID. And academia lived up to its expectation. Vaccine, after all, we are one of the so few countries in the world, right, which could develop its own vaccine, right? I trusted our own vaccine more than the other imported kind of vaccines because I had a lot of trust in that vaccine technology. So that is what India could deliver. So the talent exists, but they need to receive the right kind of problem statements and the right kind of funding too, right? And I think that is the success of ISRO. Why did ISRO succeed in the same country where everything looks like a failure? Right, from knowledge to wealth translation, from using the technology to do something, right? The reason is ISRO, you may have 12 labs, 13 labs. The major only goal for all scientists is you have to fly a satellite. You do whatever it takes you. Unless it flies in the satellite, you are not successful. You don't have a career, right? So therefore, you create that mandate. Institutions do very well. The same country developed missiles, right? The DRDO has developed so many technologies which we are now exporting, right? ISRO has been able to fly and moon landing and all of that, all with indigenous kind of things. The reason is that goal setting. And for academia also, you need the grand challenge approach. When government comes up with grand challenges, identify 5 major challenges in the country, now you bid for those grand challenges, provide solutions. And to solve any of those problems, you have to be multidisciplinary. With one single discipline, you will never be able to solve any problem. So automatically the multidisciplinarity will come in and you fund them whatever it takes to solve that problem. If you follow that grand challenge approach, if you mandate certain ways the academia will solve this thing. You define the problems basically. And if you do that, the same academic community, I can tell you, will do very well. More mission mode kind of an approach. That is the need of the hour in the country because nobody is setting goals for academia.
You are a prolific writer. You write in many newspapers. You are very much present on LinkedIn most of the time. Do you think that your writings and your posts do create an impact in India, especially amongst the program makers and the bureaucracy?
I am not against any government or anything. I care for the country. My writings all come out of my frustration that India should have been here, right? But it's here, right? It's because of certain policies, because of certain things which we are not doing right, right? So it's that frustration of where we need to be and where we are
That
is
is true.
what makes me to write or speak. It's otherwise. I have a lot of respect for even the current government is doing many things which I have been talking about for the past 2 years, right? For example, I talked about tier one institutions, tier one, two institutions collaborating with each other, and there is a pair program which Government of India launched, and I was also invited to opine on that, and so that's one thing they have done. I have always said that IIT grade faculty, because there are grade pairs everywhere, create IIT grade faculty in tier 2 institutions, create those positions in universities, for example, call them IIT grade faculty, and then hire enough people in those positions. Now these people can go to the universities and then transform the research culture, right? Now Government of India has launched a PM professorship scheme. I was on the committee, and a lot of good applications we received. So, but they cannot say that I will go to IIT and work. They have to work in a university, particularly in a state university, right? Which is a good scheme. But we need to do them at scale. In a large, let's say, university like Usmania University, if I put one PM professor, nothing is going to change. It's a huge university, one professor will not change.
Right.
But you recruit, let's say, 20 PM professors there, right? And these 20 people can transform slowly the culture of that university. Looking at them, more people will get inspired and things will change. So government is doing that. The pair program is a very good program. PM program is a very good program. Now government is also funding startups directly, which was an absolute no-no, right? This research to innovation, bridging that, you have to fund startups, you have to fund private entities. Now government is actually doing that. The 1 lakh crore fund, all of these I have been talking about in my newspaper article. So I think these are all the right steps. And but the scale, the PM, professorship is still very few. I would have liked it 10 times more, right? The pair program, could have been done at scale. Again, they, limited it to a few institutions here and there, kind of a thing. I think these good schemes need to scale up. These good schemes, like our institutions, also need a scale. Only then they can, have an impact on the ground. Otherwise, you do them, you don't see any impact. And when you do the impact assessment, you see that, nothing has changed and they think it's a failure. That's what is my worry. I think whatever we do, these are all good schemes, steps in the right direction. Unless you do them at scale, you will not see the impact. I think that is something government needs to do now. But they have started doing the right things actually.
Right, sir. So government has its limitations, but we also understand that Indians are philanthropic by nature. In even the smallest of the cities, you can find people donating to many things like for the widows, for the poor, making temples and making libraries and whatnot. Then there is CSR also, which is actually a very huge amount. Now, but when I see that money going into research, it's not even significant to the total amount that we actually can receive in the research part. Any thoughts on that, sir? The second part to this question will be, even if there is philanthropy by alumni and the other such institutes, they are basically focused on making buildings rather than funding programs. Is it true?
Which is, in fact, India was a very philanthropic kind of a nation before independence. The freedom movement, it's all these industry people who supported Mahatma Gandhi and everybody. There were a lot of philanthropy in the society. After independence, I think everybody started to keep the wealth to themselves, pass it on to their generations. And also, when government did something with good intentions, people misused it,
Right.
those schemes, and then, cheated in ways which nobody expected. So then government started to withdraw those schemes. I think now the philanthropy definitely has come down pretty significantly, but it also is because of the policies of the government now, because they have tightened everything now because of those few people who have misused some of these schemes. If you look at the new tax, kind of a regime, you can't get any exemptions for anything, right? And there's hardly any incentive for somebody to create money. In US, I do a $100 million fundraising for BITS Pilani. I also launched the endowment fund at IIT Delhi. If you look at it, most of the money is coming from the US. 70% almost comes from the US because of the tax loss there. When somebody has made money, we have only two options. One option is you give the taxes to the government, right? Or you create your own, uh, organization, right? And then you do the charity the way you want it, right? Between the two, obviously, many people would prefer the later because if I create an organization and a kind of an entity, then I can do what I like to do best. So many people in the US now have their own philanthropic arms through which they fund the activities that they want to do. They are doing it because the other alternative would have been to give that money as taxes, right? So the policies there are essentially making people give away their wealth. And they have strong inheritance laws, right? If a rich person transfers money to the children, government will take away a major chunk of it, right? So therefore, they don't want to pass on too much to their next generation. Instead, they want to spend it during their lifetime on the causes which are close to their heart, right? That encourages philanthropy in the US. And their tax systems, if you give money to somebody, those people can also invest it in ways where you can multiply the money that is given to somebody, because the Harvard, Stanford kind of endowments generate huge returns because of the ways they invest that money. In India, if you give me money, right, I can only invest it in very limited ways, and you won't get major tax incentives because of that. So you don't have any motivation to give me, because many alumni started telling me that why do I want to park my money with you? Rather, you tell me how much you need on a yearly basis, I will give it to you, because I can invest it in much better ways than you, kind of a thing. That is a problem. Now that's the reason why some of us are now, if you raise money in the US, we want to invest it in the US, where there are much less restrictions on investment. The moment you bring it to India, then you are governed by so many laws on investment. That is a problem. I think this is the tax structures that we have in the country which are not favoring philanthropy, and wherever they were, people misuse them, unfortunately, and that created a problem. So government started withdrawing and started tightening these things more and more. Now for anybody to give money is becoming difficult. So that's the issue.
So my question was, is philanthropy also giving to research, or it's mostly the buildings and
People who want to give money, I think they are also looking for some legacy.
right?
Right. And if you give money to a researcher, they will spend the money, write a few papers, it's all gone. But if I build something, it will stay, for the next 50 years.
So this type of mindset is there.
That mindset is definitely there. The anonymous kind of donors, there are a few here and there, and but there are not many. Many of them, if you come to any of our campuses, BITS Pilani, you see lots of alumni name, which is good. I don't have any problem with it, as long as a particular cause is being served by their giving that money. Right, I am quite fine with it. I have absolutely no issues with it, and so which is good. But any money is good, because these institutions need that philanthropy more than Stanfords and Harvards. IITs and BITS Pilani kind of institutions need more philanthropic funding, because the impact that we can create with that same money is at least 100x in this. You give $1 million to Stanford, it's a pittance. They wouldn't even know what to do with that money. You give the same $1 million to BITS Pilani, we can create a center of excellence. We can bring faculty together, and we can do research. We can create products. We can create prototypes. The impact you can see on the ground. $1 million given by an alumnus in BITS Pilani Goa campus for AI, right? Now BITS Pilani Goa campus is in the top 10 in the country, right, compared to other campuses. How did it happen that 1 million made them to actually bring the right people, fund the right projects, and create that impact, right? So that you can see today in India, and I think we need more philanthropic funding.
I wanted to ask this question, sir. How can a young researcher make his career in India in today's time?
When somebody joins any academic institution, right, in India, the I think the initial period is all about establishing oneself as a researcher, right? That is a time when you should do independent research, and you should publish good papers with your students, and you should do all of that. That anybody expects of a researcher, that you are an independent researcher is what one should prove beyond doubt, right? That's the first 5 years, first to 5 to 7 years. Not too many collaborations. You might want to collaborate with other people, but everybody wants to see your own independent research, right? After that first 5 to 7 years, then one should look into more multidisciplinary kind of a thing, right? You are still leading a group or you are part of a group, right? But then you are part of a multidisciplinary team, could be larger teams, right? And then more papers, and you get into diverse areas because now you are collaborating. You can take up more projects which are a solution to a problem kind of a thing, because many such translation kind of research tends to be multidisciplinary, and then you get to work with people, build a team, be part of the team. How good are you for the team is more important there, right? While you are very good, you also need to be good for the team. I think people should get into, that's the second phase of the career, right? And the third phase is when now you have done all that work, right? You have established yourself as a researcher. You have worked in multidisciplinary teams, generated some solutions to some problems. Then comes the phase when you want to even write papers in high impact factor journals, but at the same time you also want to build prototypes, right? You think of a startup, right? And I want to now commercialize some technologies. That's the third phase of the career. So I think there are different phases. These are the three phases which are important. And the initial phase is where you establish yourself as a researcher. And many a time what people do is you join and you are collaborating with 10 departments, right? And when you go for any recognition, anything, eventually we're all humans. Everybody needs that pat on the back. So when you go there, people say, but what is your work? Your every paper has 10 people, and what is that you have contributed? So people get frustrated because nobody is recognizing them. They think they have done well, but nobody can see their own contribution in that paper. So, and they have never written any papers on their own. So that becomes a problem. So therefore, I think there is a time for everything, right? The initial phase is to establish oneself as a researcher, and that is when you write papers, you even file patents. All of that can happen, right? It's always a problem to a patent and then to a paper. I think that's a process that you follow, and that's a good phase. And then part of multidisciplinary, more interdisciplinary problems, more challenging problems, more high impact journals, all of that. And then more problem oriented research, right? More startups. I think that is how the progression needs to be.
One question I wanted to add was, you mentioned about incubators in one of your interviews, and you said that incubation is not just a space and like chair and table. There should be support for prototyping and other facilities. Now, your comments on that, sir. In India, the incubation centers are coming up in a big way. What they need to actually see in future so that they build the capacity in a way that helps startups.
In fact, if you look at the challenge right now, the biggest problem in this country is TRL3 to TRL7, right? That's the valley of death. That is when industry is not interested, and you don't also know how to go from TRL3 to 7, and we don't have any institutional pathways to bridge that gap. Today, I am a researcher, right? I have shown a proof of concept. Now I want to take it to the next level. I don't even know how to do that, right? I don't know how to build, let's say, 20 prototypes of that. Because students don't want to work on something which is just a replication, a development kind of work. How do I test it in the field? I don't know. How to work with medical hospitals? I don't know, right? And how to raise money, for that kind of a work is difficult. A faculty member will not be able to figure out all of that. That is when we need institutions where I can go to, I can pitch to them my idea. Once they are convinced of it, they will put a team around that. They will put money into that idea. They can take some equity in that, eventual idea or whatever the startup that comes out of it. But somebody, helping this faculty member to bring the TRL3 technology to TRL7 technology is what is required. Many countries have created that, right? Fraunhofer labs actually do that. And in Taiwan, ITRI, right? ITRI is the place out of which both TSMC and UMC came, right? So there are institutions which are connected with academia, right? Which are also connected with industries. They take the academic IP, translate that into higher TRL, then industry gets interested, then they take up those technologies. But that should be institutionalized. If you leave it to faculty members, 1 in 1,000 will figure out how to do that, but then those remaining 999 would have failed. The country would lose out on that great IP. I think those institutional mechanisms India has not created. We don't have any institution in the country today where I can go and tell them, look, I have done up to this point now, you take care of the rest, right? I don't have any institution where I can go and do that. I think country needs to create that. And in fact, my suggestion to BFI is also to create those institutions where I know that, at least in one area, biomedical engineering, if I know I have done something which is good, impactful, I come to BFI. Now BFI takes care of the rest of it, right? Even with me or without me, doesn't matter. You have create a financial model for you for that. I don't even have a problem. But you help me take that technology to the market, right? After I have shown the original proof of concept. I think that if BFI can do, a lot of good innovations can reach the market. So I think that is something that India needs right now.
So it's not just the hand holding, but actually taking the product by ourselves to the last step.
Sales and marketing, don't even know how to sell it, right? I have started a company. Now that small company, how to sell it? They don't know, right? For example, if I have developed something in electronics, I need to be able to showcase it at major fora in the world, right? Where that consumer electronics forum and all of that, where they showcase such technologies. A simple single startup will not be able to do that. But if there is BFI kind of an organization, we have 10 such projects out of your portfolio investments, and you can showcase all of them, set up a stall, at one of those major venues and demonstrate it to the world, right? I think even that sales and marketing certification, we don't even know what is CE certification or where would I go to get the particular certification. Not every faculty member can figure it out. Even if they are able to figure it out, it will take them 3 to 4 years by the time they actually get that. But that's a critical time that is lost, right? So therefore, we need to create those institutional mechanisms, institutional pathways for TRL 3 to 7. Then exciting things will happen. Once you reach that stage, industries will take it up, or even if you start a company, you become profitable in a short enough time, and I think that is the need of the hour right now.
Right. Many startups I meet, they constantly say that Indian market is not big enough and we need to migrate to EU or US. But we are 1.5 billion and growing. So maybe what I think is they haven't figured out the right place where they can sell their product. So sir, it has been a pretty enlightening session. Any message that you want to give to the startups out there who are trying to actually build something and innovate?
I think it's a long haul, right? Particularly if you are into the deep tech kind of a startup ecosystem. I think you need to be prepared for a marathon. It's not a sprint. I think that mindset is important. And but I think there is much more that institutions need to do for these startup founders, and there is much more that government needs to do for these startups. And I recently said that our startup founders are the freedom fighters. I think they are the ones who will free this country of all the miseries that we are going through. And because they will solve your problems, they will create the wealth. They are the ones who will make Vikasit Bharat, whatever Honorable Prime Minister is talking about. I think the solution lies in startups now, and we need to more aggressively fund them, and we need to create that environment where they can prosper. I think we should the biggest challenge in this country is Saraswati and Lakshmi together. People don't want to see that. When a professor becomes rich, I can tell you there are lots of challenges within the institute, and they will start attributing all kinds of motives to the faculty members, saying that you're only taking projects which will get them the money, and all of those kind of people. I think as a culture, we need to be happy to see Saraswati and Lakshmi together. I think that Bollywood mindset we should come out. In a Bollywood movie, you would see a teacher, a professor with with that jula and then a four kind of a guy, right? That need not be the case. There are billionaires in the U.S. education system with valuations running into tens of billions of dollars. In India, that needs to become a reality. Saraswati and Lakshmi must come together, and pursuing Lakshmi to Saraswati should be completely acceptable, because I work on a technology, I develop some knowledge. Using that knowledge, I create a company, create wealth. Nobody should have a problem with it. I think that mindset needs to happen now, and we should accept that. So.
That is great. Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot for taking your time out. हमारे कठोपनिषद में एक यम नचिकेता संवाद बताया गया है, और आज मुझे वैसा ही फील हो रहा है कि मेरे सामने धर्मराज बैठे हैं एंड आई एम द नचिकेता हिमसेल्फ. सो थैंक यू सर, थैंक यू फॉर टेकिंग योर टाइम, थैंक यू फॉर एनलाइटनिंग अस. आई थिंक मी एंड माई ऑडियंस आर मच वाइसर देन बिफोर आफ्टर दिस पॉडकास्ट. थैंक यू.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure talking to you.